Namaskar. This is Dr. Y.K. Gupta, Professor of Pharmacology, former Dean, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and presently as a Principal Advisor, THSTI, Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. And I am very happy to inform you that at THSTI we have started a series of webinar in which we would be taking issues of contemporary nature, particularly related to clinical trial, clinical research, regulations, methodology, and anything which will be of interest to any clinical trialist, ethics people, regulators, and in general, the physician and pharmacologist. We will be meeting you every 15 days. We will be taking questions, answering to best of our ability and best of our competence. And we will also be consulting in the process the regulator, the DCGI office, and those questions which we will not be able to answer you, we will revert back to you in our next or subsequent webinar after the appropriate answer is sought for. I hope that this humble beginning you will like it, and we will improve our technical streaming as well as the structure wise after we get continuous feedback from you. Today, the topic of the discussion is issues related to clinical trial during COVID-19. And after I will give you brief talk about 40 minutes, we would invite questions and I will try to answer that. So that is, I would be talking to you on these issues. Issues related to clinical trial during COVID-19. You can see here that this is the classical picture of coronavirus, where you see multiple spikes in that, and this multiple spikes are specific proteins antigenic, and this also indicates multiple challenges, starting from diagnosis to prophylactic management and also the treatment. And also this involves a lot of challenges in clinical research, ethics, health, economics. Challenges of COVID-19 are multifold, as I mentioned. The challenges on environmental issues, challenges on health, challenges on society, challenges on economy of a person and economy of the nation. This is the biggest scientific challenge because most of the answers of COVID is not yet understood. The clinical research is an important issue. How to identify the clinical trial problems and how to solve them. It is a major challenge also in ethics during clinical research. Medicine is again an important issue. The different type of drugs for repurposing, for target-oriented drugs, for vaccines, and what not. Every sphere of life is affected today by challenge of COVID. I am just not frightening you, but this is the frightening figure as on May 13th, that is today. The death figure is 283153 global, 28 lakhs. as compared to India, still we are struggling with 2,293. And if I talk to you after 2 hours, I'm not talking of 2 days, the figure may change. Infected cases. Now, there are multiple projections people have done it, multiple mathematical modeling people have done it, that this many would be the doubling time, this much number will happen after 15 days, this much number will happen after 2 months, and this will be the total mortality, total morbidity in the country, and this is mind boggling. Yet there is no 100% prediction. Effort continues by organizations, by government, by individuals, but so there's uncertainty continues. Importantly, each one of us is a stakeholder in this. Each one of us. And each responsible stakeholder is a solution for all. If I am behaving responsibly using cough and sneezing etiquettes, maintaining social distancing, I am a solution to my neighbor. I am a solution to my community. But if a single person is irresponsible, then it is the problem for all surrounding it. And that's why this such type of problem cannot be solved by scientists alone, cannot be solved by the government alone, cannot be solved by regulations alone. It has to be a joint effort of society, the rules, the regulations, and the science. Now, it's a common word phrase nowadays after months of corona. Corona is here to stay, and we have to live with corona. Live with it, fight with it, live with it, learn to have continuous fight with it. What we say that the situation of yesteryears will not be again. The normals which used to be 6 months back will never be normal again. And the new normals will be the normal of future. You will not say that the crowd today is that crowd which you used to see in the Mela of Kumbh. Today, tomorrow's normal crowd would be if there are 10 people in a 10-meter square area, that itself will be called as a crowd. So that is the new definitions of which we have to identify. Coming to the topic of the day, that is the clinical trial scenario for which we are assembled here, we have a traditional clinical trial where you have a protocol where you ask the patient or the subject or the volunteer to come to the site, and then inclusion-exclusion criteria, intense observation, intense monitoring of the patient subject and recording of that, versus today the change scenario. And I would just coin a few words which are already there in debate, is a decentralized clinical trial. Artificial intelligence, increasing use of artificial intelligence, or you can say AI intensive clinical trial. Also, much talked about is adaptive clinical trial protocol. And what is the need of the day is you have to think out of box, that your clinical research, clinical trial continue with the same rigor and same speed, same accuracy, but in spite of the corona issues. Now, the trial, I would say, during clinical trial, COVID-19, the clinical trial challenges, I put them into three baskets. One is the clinical trial which are new. And you see that almost the new clinical trials have stopped globally. Rarely any clinical trial new trial is started. Even those who are there is hardly any new enrollment because of logistic issues. People are not coming forward, they are not finding to go to the clinical trial site, the site managers, the site investigators are not there, and it's not possible. The issue major problem comes when the ongoing clinical trial, maybe for diabetes, for hypertension, for cancer, for psychiatric illnesses, these are the chronic diseases, and the trials are important for new drug development. Now, there are challenges starting from recruitment to retention to taking data, and then ultimately to take this data, which is incomplete, to the regulator to make a regulatory decision. All are challenges now. The third category would be the clinical trial challenges for the trials which are done for COVID-19. As there are no clear regulation exists today, there are no clear guidelines. We are developing guidelines day by day, including US, Europe, India. They're developing as the science evolves, the guidelines are being developed. Sometimes people have said that in such a situation, which is war-like situation, war against COVID-19, and the common dictum, all is fair in love and war. But perhaps not in this case. It may be unethical sometimes not to follow ethical guidelines, ethical principles. You cannot harm a subject, and that remains the ethics concern. Now, I will just mention the emerging concept so that you understand that is a decentralized clinical trial, or sometimes also referred as remote controlled clinical trial. In this, the trial site is patient's home, unconventional. The investigators, the local health professionals are the investigators. We have to train them, we have to educate them. And then there is the intensive use of smart technology. You record the data from remote. You make the data so robust that it is as good as we are collecting the data from the bedside. The advantage is there is the avoidance of physical contact. They are basically contactless. The patient is sitting maybe 50 kilometers away or maybe 500 kilometers away, and then you need not to have a direct contact with him, and therefore all possibilities of the patient acquiring disease or you going to a patient is reduced. Data sharing is much more possible because you have a patient from this hospital, you have a patient from other hospital, so multiple sites you can create. Increasing importance of real-time evidence. This was not considered so important, but real life evidence, real time, not real time, real life evidence is gaining more and more importance. Yet it is important for preserving data quality and data integrity. All this requires the basically two important things. I'm not going into the details of that. One is the protocol has to be simple, and that is the key point. That means the protocol should be understood by the patient or subject. Protocol should be understandable by the local health professional who is now the converted investigator. And then also it requires online training of healthcare professionals who will be acting as an investigator. The another thing which is much talked about these days, particularly in reference to corona and in reference to emerging or life-threatening disease conditions, is the compassionate use. Compassionate use is the patient access to investigational medical product on compassionate ground. That means there is no drug available, there is no treatment available, there is no strategy for management, and you believe that this drug, which is not approved anywhere in the world, will be useful to this patient, though it has not gone to the complete phase 3 trial and not been approved by any regulator for market authorization. We had 3 brainstorming sessions in India involving ICMR, AIIMS, THSTI, CDSA-THSTI, and different stakeholders, including the group of rare disease organizations, and we are trying to evolve the guidelines or the regulations in India. The basic difference between the clinical trial and the compassionate use of drug are two. That is, what is the basic intent of this? If the drug is used for clinical trial, the primary objective is primarily the clinical research, and ultimately with that research you develop a strategy that yes, this drug is going to be useful for this particular disease or not useful. You develop an hypothesis, test it, and say yes, this hypothesis is proved or this hypothesis is not proved. The drug is inferior or drug is superior or drug is not inferior. Whereas in compassionate use, when the drug is given for the treatment of treatment purpose of a patient for whom there is no treatment available today, and we hope and the physician believes that this drug with a reasonable degree of opinion will provide benefit, and risk benefit assessment will be favorable towards the benefit. Now the issue is, who will give the application for compassionate use? Who will apply for compassionate use? Types of application for that. And these are different. One can apply for compassionate use of drug or medicine for individual patient. Rare disease, no drug is effective, therefore compassionate use. The drug is not approved, single patient. It can be for group of patients. There are 20 patients, one is in Delhi, other is from Gaucher's disease from other place, and then you find that yes, this drug is likely to be beneficial. It can be for widespread use like what is happening today, a larger group, and for phase 3 trial is not yet complete or maybe half, and the approval is still awaited. In that case, it is the compassionate use of drug. There are several issues on compassionate use. I am not going to detail all those, but you see, larger number of concerns have been being raised for last 5-6 years on the compassionate use, the ethical issues on the compassionate use, the characterizing the expanded access, which is also compassionate use, and the FDA, the Chinese FDA, and everybody is talking about FDA going social responsibilities, social aspects. So these are the different challenges of compassionate use, and that's what we have decided that we will soon form the guidelines into that. The ethics and social challenges in compassionate use of drugs is widely debated, and so we did in 3 brainstorming sessions also. Whether there is a need for ethics review and to what strength and how long and how much, and the ethics committee must deliberate. Is there any justification? What is the justification of this drug? Considering that this has not been fully understood, the adverse effect profile is not fully understood, and therefore take a calculated risk which is to be given when it is to be given to a patient for whom there is no treatment. Patient safety is an important issue. When you give clinical patient in the clinical trial, this patient is under responsibility of the sponsor and the investigator, and if something happens, then he is entitled as per Indian regulation compensation, and we have devised a formula for compensation, and that formula is in fact unique to India, but that compensation rule will not apply in compassionate use. In this, also it is to be decided that what is the cost to the patient, how much patient will pay for it, whether such an expensive drug patient will be able to afford it or not. That is also an issue in this. Regulations in India are about the compassionate use of medicine is yet to evolve, and now this is a high time that we must decide, deliberate. Regulators, society, and the industry have to decide on that. You have to what US FDA regulations says about it. The key point is there is a very quick approval process. An average approval of compassionate use has been for 4 days, as short as that. That within that small period, you approve the drug for compassionate use for, as I said, for individual, for a group, cohort, or for a larger population. And large number of applications are approved every year. It is also important that which phase of drug development the compassionate use drug is. And usually the drugs are in phase 3, yet not approved. But for serious diseases, data from phase 3 are compelling data even from phase 2. And you are aware of bedaquiline is one of the example of that. Unapproved drug was given to the patient of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis for immediately life-threatening disease. I think that is the bottom line of that, and more preliminary clinical evidence, even then it can be done on case-to-case basis. When you say case-to-case basis, that means you assess the possible benefit and the risk to the patient. The regulatory dilemma in compassionate use is data has no influence on decision making on marketing authorization, because this is not a protocol driven study. This is not completely regulated study. However, the issue is in the current scenario, if I put this into current scenario in the COVID, where compassionate use is usually being done as per detailed protocol, should it not be considered for market authorization? Because this is a protocol driven, because all inclusion exclusion criteria have been kept, the endpoint have been carefully decided, and though it is a compassionate use, should we reconsider whether it should be or should not be for regulatory purpose, because you will not be having a chance to do it a full-fledged regulatory trial after this situation is over. The debate is also the cost and finance of that. The decision to charge the medicine rests with the manufacturer. He is not obliged to give the patient free of cost. The actual cost, the US and a couple of other countries have advised that the actual cost should be charged. But actual cost in India can also be exorbitant, including the supply. If it is coming from US, if it is coming from other countries, then the cost of manufacturing, cost of supply can also be exorbitant. So in our deliberations, brainstorming, general consensus by all regulatory, the policy making bodies and the NGOs was that it should be free of cost to patient. What should be the mechanism? Needs to be worked out. Perhaps the government will have to pitch in. Next issue, particularly in related to COVID trials, comes as an academic trial. A trial, what is academic trial? To define a trial of a drug already approved for certain indication, and the trial is initiated by either an investigator who is an academician or by academic institution. Maybe All India Institute of Medical Sciences starts it, or maybe the CDRI starts it, research institution, or the investigator, for a new indication which was not earlier an indication, for a new route of administration. The drug was given orally, and now for COVID you want to give it by intranasal route, or you want to give it by any other route of administration, maybe by suppository, or maybe you want to give a new route of administration. Initially it was given for malaria, now you want to give it for COVID, Initially, it was given as antimicrobial, maybe macrolide antimicrobial, but now you want to give as position it as antiviral. New dose, maybe higher than the anti-malarial drug dose, or maybe the different doses form. So that is an academic trial. Where the important thing is in this situation, academic trial, where the results of clinical trial are intended to be used for academic or research purpose only. That is the caveat, and not, capital not, for seeking approval of the regulatory authority of any country for marketing and commercial purposes. That means you do it academic trial today, generate the data, and you cannot submit it to the regulator that, hey, now I want to take this to develop a commercial drug and give it to anybody in the country for that. Because the premise is that this is not a regulatory approved protocol. So that is the regulatory status. And many drugs for COVID trials are taken as an academic trial. The important thing is when you say academic trial, this is not restricted or this is not regulatory trial, and therefore rules of compensation, rules of all which are of clinical trial and new drug will not apply, so 19. And this is again a debatable issue because ultimately these have to be used for large number of patients. The another issue which we talk a lot about COVID related trials is the repurposing of drug. It's also called as a repositioning of drug, also sometimes referred as a reprofiling of drug. And it is a strategy for identifying new uses for approved or investigational drug that are not in the scope of original medical indication. To give you an example of the earliest repositioning, the aspirin was used primarily for headache. Aspirin was primarily used for fever, but later on it was repositioned for anti or clot or maybe the blood thinner, if I say so. But now that is a major established use. So several drugs are being repositioned for cancer, for rare diseases, and so the large number of drugs today for COVID-19 are those drugs which are being studied for repurposing. The advantage is that the entire drug development course of say 0 to 100 or 0 to 10, these drugs have already traveled 5, 6, 7, 8 points, and then now that means you have the preclinical data, you have some clinical data, now you have to reposition it, you have certain easiness to do it, the journey is short, and therefore the drug development can be faster and cheaper. And now I would be talking about issues of conduct of clinical trial in situation of COVID-19, wherein the issues of ongoing clinical trials such as difficulties in adherence because the subject is not able to come to the hospital, the investigator, the monitor is not able to go there. Recruitment of trial subject is difficult as we expected that the recruitment will be over in next 6 months. Now it is almost 9 months and not 10% of recruitment has been possible. Laboratory testing which you have envisaged, patient will come and do X-ray, ECG, CT scan is not possible because the hospitals are closed. The patient is not able to come. The administration of investigational product is difficult because the drug supply is not coming, patient is not supervised for taking the drug. Reporting of serious adverse event which is time bound is not being monitored carefully because there is a gap in the information system. Schedule visit which you have planned that patient or the subject will come to the hospital or the site every 7 days is not able to, so that has also been derailed. assessment of safety and efficacy parameters are not being recorded. So these are the challenges because of which ongoing clinical trial is an issue. Now, considering all these issues, that is, wherein these issues have been flagged, the DCGI has issued a notification on 31st of March, and that in essence say that protection of rights, safety and well-being of a trial subject is paramount importance. Trial, no trial, new drug, no new drug is secondary thing, but the protection of safety and well-being of the patient is, and also must ensure integrity of clinical trial data. If you are generating data, you have to see that it is, so it is a dilemma. The patient's rights as well as the ensuring integrity. Now, this is a walking on a tightrope. So the DCGI, that notification says that in such situation, sponsor, investigator, and the ethics committee, they should have a conference, they should meet in consultation, they do consultation and decide whether to discontinue this trial, or if this trial is to be continued, then what protocol amendment need to be done, what modification, what change in the protocol need to be done. Even if there is no time to inform DCGI immediately, do that in the best interest of the patient and inform the DCGI later. I will also talk about the increasing use of adaptive clinical trial design. And what is adaptive clinical trial? Adaptive clinical trial design is that which after its initiation shows modification of the trial design, allows modification, protocol modification, sample size recalculation, statistical method to be applied, you have changed it. After initiation, validity and integrity is not altered. The purpose of this is the trial becomes more flexible but efficient, and trial becomes faster because the time is limited now. Speed and ease is the need of the situation like COVID-19. And to appreciate that, DCGI has issued a notification which says to encourage research and development of drugs or vaccine for prevention and treatment of COVID-19. Any application the CDSA receives has to be processed on high priority. CDSO will provide guidance to regulatory pathway. If you just see the normal, there was a pre-IND by paying 5 lakh rupees, but here they are mandated to provide guidance. Protocol for repurposing of existing drug. If you have any drug which is to be repurposed, drugs or vaccine for COVID-19, this will be reviewed on priority basis. And again, to encourage R&D of vaccines and prevention of treatment, the DCGI also says the application for clinical trial, import and manufacture of drug vaccine is accelerated approval. For already approved drug in any country, expedited, accelerated. So all sort of process is there now in place. The DCGI notification also says that the data required for animal toxicity study, the data required for clinical study, stability study, etc., case-to-case basis, it can be abbreviated, even deferred, or even in some cases it can be waived off. This is based on what type of drug it is, how much background knowledge of the drug you have, what is the plant source. If the plant source is 100 years, 1000 years old, we have some sufficient real life experience of that, then I think these things can be. Application to manufacture and import vaccine and BABE study for comparison. Use of clinical trial may be processed within 7 days, and that is being done by regulator. An emergency import license will be granted without registration. The challenges in clinical trial for COVID-19 drugs, for drugs which are for COVID-19. So far we have talked about the drugs in general. Investigational product is an issue because target-based, it can be target-based new molecule or it can be repurposed, broadly these two categories. Important is how it is being positioned. Is it positioned as a prophylactic drug for high-risk population, say healthcare worker or immediate contact, or it is for the treatment of moderate to severe cases? Is it being positioned as a standalone or is it being positioned as an add-on adjuvant? Is it positioned as a pure or mainly or solely antiviral drug, or it is positioned as primarily or solely or both immune boosting? So that is how it will determine the, the protocol, and the data important. Some challenge here is you have developed a protocol and you should identify what is the gap and extrapolating those from in vitro, because most of the time you get a data, limited data, that this drug is antiviral in vitro test. And it is not necessary that all drugs which are in vitro effective will also be effective in vivo. And in vivo will be also effective in human. And therefore, extrapolation of this is much more difficult than the ordinary process is concerned. And in such a situation, it is also sometimes acceptable if you are using even high dose. You err at a higher dose, whereas in otherwise situation is different. And it is justified even if you are giving, provided in such a case where you are using high dose, strong pharmacovigilance activity is done. Inclusion and exclusion criteria are very, very different, particularly if it is for treatment purpose. Usually it is hospitalized patient. For prophylaxis, it can be quarantine either at home or, and if this is quarantine, then artificial intelligence or proper documentation, record keeping by mobile app is an in thing. The important issue is patient with comorbidities, maybe patient with hypertension, diabetes, coronary vascular disease, and other chronic disease where the mortality is high, whether they should be included in a trial or not. Usual condition in trials, they are usually not preferred. But in this situation, denying them into a possible therapeutic success may be considered unethical. And that is what is the dilemma also. Study design is also very difficult in COVID trials, particularly randomization may be difficult, because if you randomize somebody for treatment and for not treatment, and again the same issue would be the possible treatment you are denying. Individual patient's interest must prevail. So if the patient says that yes, I want to participate in this, I don't want to participate in this, so randomization is not possible, because randomization, so that is a right to try that supersedes the randomization philosophy. For critically ill patient will find understanding of randomization process difficult. If you ask the patient of mild moderate disease, he will agree to randomization. But if a serious condition, you ask him whether you are going to randomization acceptable, I think if he say yes, I will doubt. If he say no, I will doubt. Sample size calculation is very difficult because you have to be very, very dynamic. Efficacy endpoints are very difficult, and a lot of people have used different efficacy endpoints, starting from overall mortality, sometimes reduction in viral load of multiple times, or maybe 2 times, 10 times, 5 times, time of turning nasopharyngeal swab into negative, time for complete recovery of symptoms, duration of hospital stay, and time on non-invasive ventilator support. And there can be others. There can be combination. So different studies have used different efficacy endpoints, and that makes sometimes difficult to compare study to study. Key issues: handling dropouts. If there is a dropout of 10, 20, acceptable, it will cross the acceptable limit if it is more than 15% dropouts. That will result into missing data. And this missing data will lead to inaccurate conclusion. An inaccurate conclusion may lead to inaccurate policy decision. So what you have to see, you have to devise a method for the best fit line, and which should be accurate and which should be more predictable. Participant risk-based analysis has to be done continuously. Investigational product issue, supply, uninterrupted supply, inventory at the investigational site. You have to take the drug to the site, maybe different multi-centric site, and administration of investigational product to the participant. How the nurse will go to the patient, how the attendant, caregiver will go to the patient. Many times they will also falter. And SAE reporting or AE reporting, these are issues. Issues with ethics committee is also challenged because the ethics committee does not have the full information of the investigational product, but yet they have to do the risk-benefit assessment. Comparator may be empirical and unestablished. Empirical comparator is also not established, and variable endpoints and on-site monitoring is difficult, and also yet well-reasoned decision and urgent decision has to be taken. May not be full committee sometimes. The role of DSMB is now more, and the issue of informed consent is critical. Lastly, if I say, after trial you have to share your results. Either you have to publish your results, and it is moral obligation to share the results as soon as possible, so that the world at large can get benefit. Premature and incomplete information sometimes may be misleading, and that's what happened many times. The manuscript at review stage, not peer reviewed, pre-print version, they have been publicized, and then this is the inconclusive method. And intentionally leaked information sometimes must be, and it is important that we must carefully view it, and this requires judicious review process. I would end my talk. I can go on, but to summarize the COVID-19, I was thinking how to do that, and I wrote a few lines. I hope that it will fit into this. COVID-19 can affect all, you, me, and everybody, including president of any state, most powerful to the most developing nation. So COVID-19 can affect all. All want to fight, and that's why everybody is fighting, all nations, including our country, every citizen. Have idea, bad or bright. People, everybody has some drug in mind, either repurposing or indigenous or some practice. In India, different pathies have also. But the answer would be the clinical trial has to decide which best to choose and which to keep aside. So thank you very much, dear friends, for spending this time. And we have flagged the idea of asking question, and my colleague has collected several questions which are common, and I will try to answer some of those questions to best of my ability. And those questions which we are not able to answer now, I will ask you to read and give me the answer, or I will ask the experts, the regulator. Maybe next time we will come with answer and maybe more questions. So, Dr. Apurva, I would now ask you to shoot me the questions which you have, if there are any, from the audience.
Yes, so we have received a lot of questions from the audience.
Lot of? Okay.
Yes, and we have compiled them. And the first question that has been asked by a lot of participants is that in the current scenario, follow up as per protocol is interrupted. So, how do we do the efficacy assessment?
Follow up of the protocol as per protocol is interrupted. I think this is a very serious question, because risk is that number of patients are less, missing data will lead to inaccurate result, and inaccurate result, how you will do the best fit line, or how will you do the patient risk benefit assessment. And therefore, in such a scenario, even if you are making some judgment, more emphasis should be made on PMS studies, PSUR, and strong pharmacovigilance. Sometimes surrogate markers are also used as a supportive, but not as a 100%. And also predictive statistical models are being used so as to see that if there is a disruption or if there is a more missing data, then how best the data can be salvaged. But I would have like to have a better answer from the experts. But this is what I think so.
The next question that has been asked is that some clinical trial sites are not allowing CRCs to enter the COVID ward. In such a scenario, how to manage the data at site?
Practical issue, I agree that nobody will allow a person in the COVID ward unless he is fully protected, because of, and he should also not go into that, because the patient's safety as well as healthcare workers' safety is equally important. What can be the solution? You have to think out of box. Perhaps the solution could be the healthcare worker who goes to him or her, the patient, you ask him to take the mobile picture, or have a remote call from the patient, ask what he is feeling. E-copy, scanned document will minimize the communication between the patient and the physical contact between the COVID patient in the trial and you. I think these are the solutions which one have to devise.
The next question is that due to lockdown, clinical visits could not be performed. So, how do we need to report all these deviations?
It's quite possible, and that's what I said. I think I gave a passing reference that the scheduled visits or the visit from outside the hospital to the hospital or the clinical site is very difficult at this stage. Many people are not willing to come, and because of they are apprehensive of getting infection, they are not getting transport facility, they are not coming because of the complete lockdown. And in this situation, there will be missing data. And this missing data needs to be carefully documented. And DCGI has notified, realizing this issue, that if such a situation arises, the three important stakeholders, that is the sponsor, the ethics committee, and the investigator, should come together and decide how to handle this situation. And that is the best solution. That is what the challenge is.
So, another important question is that why are we promoting clinical trials with expensive drugs like remdesivir when you are actually heading the National List of Essential Medicines, which is based on affordability of medicine?
A very tricky question. I am co-chairing the National List of Essential Medicine, which is primarily based on affordability, accessibility, quality of medicine, and the one of the important thing is HTA. That means you identify the cost benefit assessment. In such a situation of COVID like emergency situation, to best of my knowledge, the cost benefit is not has not been done, and rightly so. This is not the time to assess the cost of life, and therefore maybe later on when we have a couple of options available, then one can do which is best, which is less expensive, and then we decide that. But ultimately this will be done when we have a number of options, but and when there is no option, this is done, and therefore the expensive medication is still acceptable. What is your part of the question is? So that is what I think is the issue today.
So last but not the least, the question is that all funding is going to the corona drug research. Will it not affect the funding for other research?
I would say not all funding, but time demands, the situation demands that corona development of vaccine, development of drug against corona, which is a danger to the country, to the community, should be strongly funded. Now, this is very possible that this funding will come from funds at some places. And therefore, though the government of India, our government has pumped huge money to balance the economic situation, to revive the economy, but I would urge all my fellow scientist colleagues that this is the time to stop Me Too research. This is the time not to waste money in a research which is non-productive. This is the time to do productive translational research or basic fundamental research which is giving real new things. This, at the moment, I think that rationalization or optimization of research funding can solve this issue to larger extent. Doing COVID research, yet not hampering, not stopping, or not compromising on the research on our vital issues like hypertension, tuberculosis, malaria, and things like that. Thank you very much, my dear audience. Now, at the end, I would like to thank you for giving your critical time, and I will appreciate your feedback on how we can improve and what topics and next topic you would like to interact with. I will also like to thank my team and particularly Shri Balaji, who has been instrumental in recording this and streaming this from IIT Madras. I will thank my colleague Vandana Chawla for making slides for me in consultation with Sucheta, who helped in this, and also Jitendra. I would also thank my colleague Dr. Apurva Mathur, who did prepare the questions for me, and I also thank all the staff from THSTI who was part of this endeavor. Thank you very much. Namaskar.